I am Brad Keelor. You are a Director's Cut viewer. It is time for our Best of 2021. Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Director's Cut. My name is Brad Keelor. I'm the director of the Geo-Institute, and that is why we call this show Director's Cut. Every week, I sit down with a different GI member who has stories to tell about themselves. Some of them are personal, some are professional, all of them are fun. If you are not familiar with the Geo-Institute, head on over to geoinstitute.org and you will find out we are a technical society with about 12,000 members, most of them geologists and geotechnical engineers. If you like what you see, please click subscribe, please click get notifications, and we will let you know every single time we post something to the YouTube channel. For those of you who are the perceptive type, you will notice there is no one next to me this week. That is because this is our best of 2021. 47 episodes of Director's Cut, 470 questions, plus all the bonuses. We have whittled it down to 10 and maybe a little bonus at the end for you to enjoy. So with no further ado, here is our best of 2021. So the other question that we ask everybody, and we teased this a little bit in the intro, is how did you first get involved in ASCE and GI? And you have, I would say, the best story about this that we've had on Director's Cut yet.
Well, so I joined ASCE as a freshman at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo, probably the first quarter, early on. I went to an ASCE student group meeting, and the upperclassman that signed me up and took my dues check and everything is now my husband. So that is how I met Luke there. And though we were friends before, for a long time before we were married. Then after graduating Cal Poly and becoming a practitioner, I was involved in like the local Bay Area ASCE events, the young member events and the evening seminars. It was just a great way to start to learn more and build my professional network. Then I went to grad school at UC Davis and really became involved in the Geotech Graduate Student Society there. I felt like it really helped shape my graduate experience at UC Davis with the amount of outreach activities we did, connection with the GI, and everything that kind of brought in lecture, again, networking and so on. Then as a new assistant professor, the first geo-congress that I went to was in 2012 in Oakland, the State of the Art, State of the Practice Geo-Congress. And that was where I went to a soil properties and modeling committee, started the process of joining the committee and becoming an active member there, and really haven't looked back. I think that working with the committee and just being involved in going to every Geo-Congress and taking advantage of all those opportunities has really helped build my professional network, met great friends and collaborators there. It's been a good way to kind of get a foundation to build upon for my career.
And that is fantastic. I mean, all of that is fantastic, but I don't know how many people can say that they met their spouse. I'm just going to take credit because of ASCE. So I almost never repeat questions on Director's Cut, but this one I had to repeat. And I asked this one first to Archie Filshel from Aero Aggregates back at the end of 2020. You've been in the Philadelphia area for, I don't know if your entire career, but a lot of it. Mm-hmm. Do you have a favorite Bob Kerner story, since he is such a legend from that part of the world?
Yeah, actually I have two. So, and both of them, I think the reason why I love them is because they reflect Bob Kerner's humility. The first one was that when I was a senior, we had this thing called Senior Seminar, and we had a bunch of guest speakers come in, and Bob Kerner came in to talk to us. And of course, we were all like, oh my what is Bob Kerner? So he's talking to us and he starts telling us how he got his PhD and what a nonlinear path it was for him getting to where he was. And, from being, thinking he was going to be an attorney and like it not working out. And I remember he said like his first job this is a quote, "I went after money the way the devil goes after a soul." And he was like, that was the wrong thing. He's like, I don't know why I was so focused on that, but like it was the wrong thing. And like we were just all aghast because you look at someone like that and you think, oh, they had it figured out since the day they were born.
Right.
And it was so refreshing that we all just left like, oh, like it's okay that we're 23 and don't know what we're doing. It's completely okay. And I said that's one of my favorite memories of him. And my other favorite memory of him, very similar, is he had written an article about this. I believe that it was in Geo-Institute or in Geostrata a number of years ago about this failure that occurred on one of the first projects that he was on. And he actually gave a talk at the Delaware Valley Geo-Institute. And of course, it was much more colorful than the written part, right? And just about him just basically panicking, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm an engineer and I'm supposed to be figuring this out. I don't know what's happening. And eventually, though, figuring it out. And again, what a fabulous story, because he didn't know what the answer was right away, but he stuck to it and he kept working on it and kept trying to figure out what was going wrong at this particular site and eventually figured it out. So yeah, those are my two favorite stories about him.
Were there slides involved in the second one in the presentation? Because Archie told this story, and I've heard this from multiple people, how he would have multiple slide decks going at the same time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah, so like back in olden times when you actually had like,
yeah,
right? Yeah, there would be like slide projector 1 and slide projector 2, and he did do that. Again, I'm going to show my age here, is that when I took geosynthetics, the book hadn't been published yet, and we took the grad class in a conference room at Drexel with like, I don't know, there was 10 of us, I guess, at the conference room table. And yes, he'd have the two slide projectors going at once, and which like all those pictures pretty much ended up in the book eventually.
Oh, that's amazing. So you gave us a bonus story. Like this next question is, especially after hearing a little preview of your answers, the pièce de résistance of this interview here on Director's Cut this week. What mistake have you made in your career that you still think about regularly?
So, I told you before, I've heard other people get asked this question. They're like, well, yeah, I can't think of a mistake, When you ask
those people
question,
are liars, though.
Yeah, you asked me that question, it was like, oh my God, this mistake, that mistake, this mistake, I can categorize them, technical mistakes, mistakes with writing reports, hiring mistakes, business decision mistakes, etc. But the one that kind of stands out to me in the late 90s, we were doing a 74-foot high soil nail wall at the Natchez Bluff in Natchez, Mississippi. And the bluff had failed right up in the street called Clifton Avenue, had gone all the way down the hill. It had dropped like 50 feet. And so these houses were on the National Register of Historic Places. They were fantastic. In particular, there was one called the Learned Mansion. And the failure had gone right up to the steps of this house. And the lady who owned it, Maggie Berkeley, couldn't even get homeowners insurance. So we were nervous that we wanted the wall to be really stiff and hold those houses back. So we decided to put a tieback anchor through the soil nailing, okay, at the very top. And then to stress that against the shotcrete. So I was driving in my car, the construction was underway, and the project manager, Steve Buckner, calls me, and I go, hello? He goes, Maggie Berkeley's house has a basement. And I said, oh no. So obviously he determined that because he had drilled the tieback anchor into the basement wall. We had no idea. None of the other houses had basements there, this big mansion. So I was like, he goes, well, what do you want to do? I'm like, did you drill through the wall? He goes, no, we stopped. I said, well, just put the tieback on a steeper angle. We were back about 15, 20 feet from the basement wall. And that way you drill under the footing. And so not thinking what we were doing there, we did that all the way along. And so putting that tieback anchor on a steeper angle put a downward component of load when we stressed the anchor on the entire wall. But we didn't think about that. And especially because we were in a soil called loess, which doesn't really bond well to the shotcrete. So when we got down about 25 feet and we dug down for the next lift, all of those anchors pushing down on the wall made the whole wall drop like 5 feet. And that was another call. That one was a late call that had me get in a car and go to the airport. And along with the president of Hayward Baker, unfortunately. But we were able to fortunately jack the wall back up, and within a week we were going again. But that was a big mistake, not considering the fact that I was, with that decision, putting so much more downward force on that wall that it wouldn't be able to support. So
I had one really big question about this story. When you told it earlier, you mentioned that she was a psychic or a clairvoyant.
Yeah. So
why did she? But my question before you go into that, why did she not know this was going to happen and come out and alert you guys?
Yeah, I don't know, but she was famous. I didn't believe in psychics, but she was used by the New Orleans Police Department to find missing persons. The Natchez police would come over and ask her questions. She'd tell them where to look for things. So I never believed that. But she had Steve Buckner and I over for lunch one day, and she gave us some sandwiches, and we were sitting down in her living room, and I was looking around at all this artwork and everything. And she came in, and I thought to myself, boy, she's a really nice looking older lady. And she looked at me and she said, and I was like, oh my God. So I was going like, eat your sandwich. Don't think of anything you don't want her to know.
So in the open for this episode, I said that you were going to tell us how you can cook anything on a waffle iron.
Yeah.
How did you start cooking on a waffle iron? What's the craziest thing you've made? Tell us some waffle iron cooking stories.
Okay, yeah. So this kind of dates back again to high school, but it's kind of silly, but like I opened a checking account when I started working. So, I was like 14 or 15 and went to the bank and I was like, I need a checking account. And they had that like free gift that they give people for opening. So that month it was a waffle iron and I was like, okay, cool. And then I just pretty much like put it away, never really used it, like maybe once or twice. And then it wasn't until junior year in college when I moved off campus and could have a kitchen and stuff that my parents were like, you should take this waffle iron and like do stuff with it. So I think that day we had, we like me and my roommates moved in and we were like, oh, let's like make something random on the waffle iron. So we just like cracked an egg in, and then like my friend wanted to make cookies, so then we just like made cookies and like put that on there. And then we were like, I wonder what else we could do. And that was pretty much like where like the beginnings of it. And then for some reason I just got really into it, and I was like, any food I made, I was like, I wonder if I could do it in the waffle iron.
What was the biggest waffle iron cooking fail?
Oh man. What didn't? Oh, and in retrospect, this was pretty obvious, but I tried to make like some frozen ravioli in it, and so I just like took the frozen ones, stuck them on, closed it, and was like, maybe it'll work, and it didn't. They just ended up like kind of mushy and like all melted on top. That's the other thing with waffle iron is that like I had to figure out some pretty good tricks to clean it because of all the fails. But it's worked out.
I mean, I would say so, especially if it was a free gift from a bank.
Yeah,
that's pretty solid.
Right. I was like, I have nothing to lose.
Are you still using the same waffle iron, or have you upgraded?
the one that I got originally, like that one, I think it passed on like my senior year of college. I still remember, like I went to plug it in to make some eggs or something, and it like didn't light up anymore. And I was like, oh, like thanks waffle iron. So I still have it. Like I kind of kept it because I was too like emotionally attached to all the memories. But my sister was kind enough to replace it with like she got me like a Belgian waffle irons, like the flippy ones. So that was actually a pretty nice upgrade. uh, yeah, and then so that's the one I've been using the past few years, and I've accumulated a couple novelty ones. I have one that does ones in the shape of like sea animals. So I can do like dolphin waffles and stuff like that.
I am 100% certain you are the first person I've ever spoken to that has a novelty waffle iron.
Yeah.
But you see those in the store and you're like, I wonder who the market is for these things.
And I was like, it's me.
Now I know.
You only need one person. But yeah. So yeah, it's like luckily with the ravioli thing, I was able to redeem it. I ended up just kind of trying it from scratch once, and that worked a lot better than the frozen one. So trial and error.
I'm pretty sure I'm never going to try to make raviolis in the waffle iron, though. Like I feel very certain of that.
Yeah, some things don't. Some things are better unwaffled.
But that is fantastic. So the question that we teased at the beginning. So what's the last thing you repaired on your own, and how did you learn to do that?
Well, the last thing I fixed was my truck. There was a piece of my bumper that needed to be fixed, and so it took me 10 minutes. It was no big deal. Where did I learn? Well, I'm a high school dropout. I left school in 10th grade, and I became an auto mechanic, and I did that for 8 years, and actually went back to school for music and realized that I wasn't going to make much money doing that. So then I went over to engineering instead.
So what do you think was the thing that, what do you remember a moment where you decided you wanted to go back, or was it kind of a gradual thing?
Oh, I had started playing guitar in a band and was getting a little bit better, and I wanted to go to a music school. So I went and took my high school education one day over in Norristown. Took a day, I met a lady there. She goes, I hope I passed the math part this time. I failed it 5 times. I'm like, I should have studied.
That's like not the thing you want to hear when you're going into that test.
Yeah. So I don't know what her problem was. So yes, you all went to school for 3 years. I did it in a day,
And now that you've been an engineer for 30 years,
yeah.
I guess you could tell her you did okay on the math part, I guess.
Yes, I did okay.
So once you got there, I mean, I think this is an amazing story. So you went on, you ended up getting your master's, and what are you doing now? You are still pursuing higher education.
Yeah, in 92, I got my master's and I went right into my PhD program at Drexel and was actually there for 3.5 years. And then I got offered a nice job in Southern California. And I went to my advisor, what should I do? And he goes, go, and I'm like, what? I've been doing this for 3.5 years. And he goes, just go. You've got a couple journal articles together. We'll call that the thesis. And I'm like, why? He goes, I don't care about you and your PhD. I care where I want you at that firm so I can send you new engineers,
That's pretty solid logic.
Right, yes. The only problem is that I was going to go work 60 to 70 hours a week normally and didn't have any time for the thesis. So a few years, 2 years back, I needed to scratch this itch. I was a year away and I just wanted to do it. So I went back and now I'm, we'll see. Maybe in June, maybe in the next one. It's not a particular hurry, but that's the game plan.
Do you feel like it made a difference in your education that you did work for all those years and then you went back to school? I mean, I went straight through all the way through master's, right? So I'm 21 years old and I'm in grad school. I see these people around me and I remember thinking these guys are taking this so seriously. And I really wasn't, because I guess I had nothing to compare it to. Do you feel like it made you a better student that you had all those years in between?
Oh, absolutely. I was about 5 years older than my peers at school. So that makes a big difference just to start with. But the fact that I was giving up a huge salary, I mean, I was making bank as an auto mechanic, giving that up to come here to this class, yeah, that was some motivation, you know.
So at least during my time at ASCE and GI, and I think for some time before that, you've been Mr. International, certainly for GI and for ASCE at large. I know you've had a lot of different collaborations throughout the years. What's the most unique international collaboration that you've had?
Well, actually, the one that comes to my mind is not related to ASCE and GI, but I would have to say Pointe du Hoc. It's one of the landing sites of the Allied forces on June 6, 1944 in Normandy. And I get a call from a colleague here on campus working with a congressman. And he says, I need your help because there is an erosion problem at Pointe du Hoc in Normandy, and we need your help to fix that. Chet Edwards was the name of the congressman. And he was chair of the Veterans Committee in the House of Representatives. And we worked with the French on one side and the Americans on the other side, because Pointe du Hoc is French ground. I mean, it's French property, but it's maintained by the Americans because we lost a lot of young people on that site. You know, people that every time. They were the age of my son, and I'm so grateful to the Americans for coming to deliver my parents. Anyway, so we went there, and the problem was not very difficult, but it meant so much to me that, you know, basically you have cliffs, and at the bottom of the cliffs you have caverns. And the caverns are formed because the waves are attacking the blocks of limestone that are cracked up by bending movements. And so the rocks are removed, and that form caverns. And if you can imagine, if you have a cross section of the cliff and you've got this big hole here, the overhang is going to fall down after a while. And they were losing a lot of ground, and some of the historical monuments on top of the cliffs were about to fall into the sea. And it was very interesting in those discussions. Some of the French leaders were saying, well, you know, this is the nature taking its course, and we're going to lose the monuments, they're going to fall into the sea, and then they're going to be washed out, and this is natural course. And by golly, the General Hawkins would get up in those meetings and say, sir, we have lost a lot of young people on that side, and we're not going to let those monuments go down. And so he was speaking English. Mm-hmm. And the folks in France, the French leaders were afraid of speaking French. And I was the guy that could translate. And I was also the guy that had the technical knowledge, so I could explain and translate at the same time. So the French person turns to me and says, what did he say? I said, he's not very happy. Anyway, in the end, we backfilled. The problem was fairly simple. We backfilled the caverns. We put the monument on micropiles, and the one interesting fact was to try to convince General Hawkins. He said, "Okay, you're making those recommendations. How good is that solution?" I said, "Well, we have two countermeasures: backfilling the caverns and putting the monument on micropiles. Therefore, we're essentially multiplying the probability and reducing significantly the risk." And he said, "I don't understand what you're saying. Tell me another way." I said, "Well, sir, I would not mind putting my 2 kids in that monument and live there for another 30 years. He said, "Now you convince me. We're doing it."
That's great. So you had a lot of pressure on you in that situation, but also, I mean, obviously a lot of personal interest and a lot of personal pride in working on that project as well. Certainly, if anybody is interested, it's a little bit of a different story. In the geotechnics of the D-Day invasion, we did a Geostrata Extra episode on that in the spring of this year around Memorial Day, and we can put a link to that in the comments under this interview. So that was an amazing story, and I think that definitely fits under unique collaborations. This next question was originally directed only at Murray, but Del, I think you might want to weigh in here at the end, but we'll start with Murray on this. You mentioned up at the top of the show that Soil Vision had been acquired by Bentley a few years ago. What was the experience like for you personally when you got that call initially that there was interest there, or when you got to the end of the road and it was complete? I mean this more in business terms, I guess, than in technical ones. Just what was your experience like through that process?
Yeah, it was an interesting experience, I would say. It wasn't, I was in the mode where you're putting your head down and you're working hard. And I wasn't necessarily thinking about being acquired or anything like that. We were just focused on growth. We'd had a few good years, and had strong growth. We're working hard on it. But I noticed some Bentley people showing up to a webinar I was giving one day, and thought, "Oh, that's kind of interesting." And then I all of a sudden got a phone call the next day, and they started talking to me about, maybe we could do some greater things partnered together. And initially I thought, well, I'm a little young. I wasn't planning to sell the company. But when I sat down and thought about it, you start to realize you're not going to live forever, and your career has a certain limited lifespan, and you don't always get opportunities every day. So, when I thought through it, we were trying to grow and I was hitting certain barriers. And I realized that actually going with Bentley alleviates a lot of these barriers of just growing the company through all of these, just having more of a global impact, for example, and obtaining distributors and sales in every part of the world in every language. And Bentley's very worldwide. They have offices in 65 countries, and they're just very well suited to distribute software around the world and very good at it. So it really was a process, I would say, on my part, where at first I wasn't for it, and then all of a sudden I realized, you've taken the company 23 years. You really need somebody, you need a partner, somebody bigger than you to take it into the next phase, and that's a good thing. And so it's very much an emotional up and down, though. Because you're wanting to do this, yet you realize that you're going to lose all control of this, and you got to be okay with that. And you really have no certainty. You try to ask a lot of questions in the process, and I'm sure I stretched the patience of a lot of Bentley people and all the questions I answered, but they were very gracious and answered my questions, and in the end reassured me and that this was a good thing, and it was a good process overall. It's up and down. We weren't on the back end, we weren't knowing about that they were pursuing multiple companies, and so we heard mid-process, they've acquired Plaxis too, and so that all of a sudden you go from a real high, and then oh, okay, this changes things. And it's so there's a lot of up and downs emotionally, is what I would say, that go through in the background. My wife would say that if you were to ask her that. And but it's all good in the end. It worked well. I enjoy working with a larger team, and it's exciting to see where we can go. I think as a larger team, working with the Plaxis group, I enjoy. It's nicer being part of a bigger team and having excellent people all over the world that you can just team up with, rather than having to create that yourself and do it. So overall, it's a great thing. I've really enjoyed it.
So if you could give one piece of advice to, someone with a technical or scientific background who's in the same situation, maybe starting this or going through it right now, what would it be?
Oh, that's a great question. You're making me think on the spot here, but
we always have bonus questions.
There you go. Throw me sideways. I think just, be open to possibilities, see the greater world view, see where you want to go, and be don't be afraid of the future and what might come of it. It's a stretch. Some of the biggest things that can be good for us require the biggest risk and the biggest uncertainty in our lives. So don't be worried about when you have decisions that have great uncertainty, because maybe this is a good thing for the future and it can move you to a phase that you could have never accomplished on your own.
Well, that's great. And originally when I put that question in there, it was just directed at you, Murray. But Del, I think you've got some insight on this as well in your time with GeoSlope.
My story goes back to 1966 when I was a young professor. Came to the University of Saskatchewan to teach. And there was an elderly man, Robert Peterson, who was the designer of the South Saskatchewan River Dam. And he came to me and said, if I was a young man starting my career at the university like you are, he said, I would give some serious thought to this thing they call the computer. He says, I think it's going to change the way we do our engineering. And so I took him seriously. I learned BASIC, I learned Fortran, and I wrote a slope stability program. And then I did a very controversial thing. I started a company called GeoSlope along with my brother, who was trained as a systems analyst. And so we built up GeoSlope, and it grew and became bigger and bigger. And pretty soon it was time to turn it over to the employees of the company. And I sold my shares and got out. So, and then it was within a matter of a short while after that my son, unknown to me, started Soil Vision. I say unknown to me because my wife and I were living in Hong Kong, and I was teaching at Hong Kong University of Science and Technology. I arrived back in Canada, and Murray greeted me at the airport and said, Dad, I started a company. I says, oh no. And I think we'll leave it there.
Our final question. Did you get to visit the USSR or any Eastern European countries when they were under communist regimes? And what was the most memorable thing about those visits?
Well, that could take a half hour to tell all those stories. Yes, I was there once in Estonia with an ex-girlfriend who was from Estonia, which is part of the Baltics. It's close to Finland. And that was surprising. And then I went back for an international conference in soil mechanics in 1973 with a group from Scandinavia. So everything was organized, the trip, the tickets and everything. We just paid through the society. The Swedish Geotechnical Society organized this. And when I was in Moscow, I took some time off and went to the local department store, GUM, the big government-run thing on Red Square. It's a very famous, 8-story high building or something. And I went in to buy some toys or some children's books or something for my daughter. I'd like to do that. She was about 5 or 6 at that time, or 4, I guess. So anyway, go in and they have the most complicated system you could ever imagine. So you say, okay, I want this and this and this, and you go to pay for it. Oh, they don't take money. They write you a tab or a ticket or something, and you take that to the cash register. So you have to stand in line again while there's a guy in there or gal that takes your money. And then they write paid or whatever they do on that. And I take that slip back, have to stand in line again at the place to get whatever you bought. I mean, talk about designing a system that must be frustrating as heck for the Russians.
Yeah.
And they speak the language. And right away you start to think, boy, they got a rocket up there and with Sputnik before our guys got off the ground. You know, I mean, they were whomping us in the space race and everything. I'm thinking, boy, that's crazy. You know, although now we'd had a man on the moon by then, 73. So I guess we were ahead there at least. But I think we were somehow, and this is an experience of several of my colleagues from Purdue that said, you go there once and you think, and we're afraid of these guys. It's a very incompetent system, and yet they were able to do a lot of fantastic things in the space race and militarily, and that's where all the resources obviously went.
And I think the more time passes, the more we realize that we were both afraid of each other.
Yeah.
And even in the late 80s, I think, when I was a kid becoming a teenager, it's very bizarre that system was so close to collapsing, and we largely had no idea. It was
I mean, where was our CIA? What were they spying on? I mean, they should have told first President Bush, the wall's going to come down real soon.
But that is fantastic. That was a great story, and I mean, it just must have been a completely otherworldly experience at that time.
Well, the other thing, I was thinking about this ahead of time, obviously a little, and the other visit was to Poland in the mid 80s, and there was a Pole that had worked in Sweden when I was at the Swedish Geotechnical Institute that I kept in contact with, Boleslav Mazakevich, and he was a harbor engineer doing a lot of work on harbors in Gdynia and Gdansk up there on the Baltic shipyards, and he wrote a couple of books on dry docks and that kind of thing, heavy construction stuff. And so he tells this story at a dinner party about the Russian and the Pole that were out in the woods, and they found a cache of gold. And so the Russian puts his arm on the Pole's shoulder and says, "We'll split this like brothers." And the Pole looks up and he said, no, please, 50-50. Because Mazakevich used to tell me they would take hard currency, which they had a hard time getting, buy sheeting in Denmark or Germany, ship it to somewhere, and it ended up probably in Vietnam. I'm sorry, I didn't expect that. End up in Vietnam, I can't answer it. I'll let my wife answer it. Sorry, I don't know how to do that.
That's okay.
I'll turn it off. I'm sorry. One more ring and then it'll be off. So anyway, the other thing that anyway, that must have been terrible that they had to do that, and that was the brother, Big Brother was going to take care of this, and then they ended up taking most of their hard work. Big Brother will take care of you. Well, from the Poles' point of view, that wasn't very realistic. But let me tell you one other little quick story.
Sure.
They have their jokes are fantastic. It's that kind of thing. They've got a political twist or something associated with it. And there were two, a party leader at that time and the premier or whatever prime minister. One was called Gierek and one was called Gurmulka. And I don't know which one it was, but let's say Gierek goes out in Warsaw, in the capital, and goes in this square at night, and it's deserted. And there's that's in the middle of the square is a pillar, with somebody standing up there with a sword and kind of a medieval guy. And turns out it's a king, Wenceslas. And this guy, Gierik's down there wandering around, and he hears this voice saying, "Bring me a horse. Bring me a horse," because the statue is standing on, is on foot. And he said, "What?" And he goes up and he says, "My gosh, it's the statue saying, 'Bring me a horse.'" He goes back the next morning, sees Gomulka and tells him the story. And Gomulka said, "You just had too much vodka. You're crazy." He said, "No, come with me tonight and we'll go into the square and see." And so they go in there and they hear, "Bring me a horse. Bring me a horse." And they get up real close there and the statue says, "I said a horse, not an ass."
Okay.
What is the stinkiest place you have ever been, and did you go back?
Okay, Brad, have you ever been at our centrifuge or shared use
I
facility?
haven't. I'm so sad. It's
Okay.
I'm gonna make the trip. I promise.
Okay, so I'll tell you that when we do experiments that feature liquefiable soils or saturated soils overall, we gotta get some water in there, which, to honor the scaling laws, it cannot be water. So we use what we call hydroxypropyl-methylcellulose, which, is a fluid of adjustable viscosity. Let's call it like that. And it does all great things for scaling and maintaining those laws. Great. But when you get the specimen off the arm and it's summer, especially in the summer, and you start dissecting it, it stinks. It stinks. So that's basically it. Have I gone back to it? I never did.
Where are the chemistry and the agriculture departments to help you guys with this?
We do it pretty fast. We take pictures, for our reports and our publications. And then we throw it away. It varies, but the longer you let it sit, the worse it becomes. I never did it as a student because all my research was numerical. Now I get, to watch many of our students do that. So the irony is I have been back and I hope that I will be able to go back and I will have plenty of specimens to dissect. That's very ironic, but that's how it is. It doesn't last for long. It's pretty quick, but it can happen. It can happen.
That is a fantastic answer, and you get paid to go back technically, so I guess that's not all bad.
It's fantastic pictures. When we cut the specimens, fantastic.
So another thing that people know about you, if they've talked to you at all, is that you're from Puerto Rico. We're getting to a specific place here. You've got a good answer to this one, so it's going to be a very basic question here. What is your favorite place in Puerto Rico, and what did you get to do there that made it so cool?
So when I was in school, I had the opportunity to do research in an island between Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic. There is a plateau in the middle of the ocean. And I had the opportunity to do coastal processes. So I create beach profiles, grab samples, sieve those samples to see how much energy was in the shore at that time. So I did this research for a year. So to get to that island is really difficult. And because I did this through the university, they flew me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I know. 12 times, for a year. And it was amazing. The channel is so deep and so dangerous. So, I did the boat trip a couple times by myself. And I was like, man, I can't imagine the size of the sharks in here. So when I had that opportunity to fly and be in the island for 5 days, was like a long weekend. I had the opportunity to work with biologists, and I helped them with the sea turtles. They mark them and mark the nests in the shore. So it was one of the most beautiful opportunities I have in my life. I was doing my research, but it's an island with caves inside the caves. Something amazing. So so yeah, that's like the most the biggest treasure I believe Puerto Rico have. And no one is in there. It's not a tourist island. It's pretty much for research. So so that island is, again, is in between Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic, and it's very, very small. So
Did you guys camp there, or did you have cabins, or what did you do?
so you can camp, but because I was doing the investigation through the university, they let us stay in the houses.
Okay.
So with a fan, electricity, warm food. The water was a little bit brackish, depending if was summertime or so, because the water came from the rocks. So
Okay.
but yeah, amazing.
What is the coolest animal that you saw while you were on the island? Because there must have been stuff that you had encounters with that you wouldn't in a more populated area.
Well, in the island they have iguanas,
Oh, wow.
and they are huge. They're like dinosaurs. So I believe those are endemic from that island. So they are being adapting to be in that kind of environment. So they introduced it before other animals like porks and goats, I believe, but they are more like in the top in the top of the island. So, but around in the ocean, it's no sediment, it's no rivers, so it's no sediment in the water. So everything is so clear. I saw dolphins, whales, sharks, barracudas, sea turtles, and the vision is like so clear. So amazing. It's an amazing place.
So that sounds like a great experience. And now everybody's we'll put it in the notes under the description where that is so people can look it up. Well, that about does it for our best of 2021. I hope you enjoyed it. Again, if you did, click subscribe, click get notifications. We'll let you know every time we post something. Director's Cut goes up every Wednesday morning around 10 a.m. Eastern on the YouTube channel. So you'll want to be looking out for it next week and every single week. Thanks again to all our viewers, and we will see you next week. Thanks again for being here, and we will see everybody next week. And thanks again, and we will see everybody next week. And we will see everybody next week. And we will see everybody next week with a brand new Director's Cut. I think we have to have a bonus question here because, as you can see from Liz's background, she is a little bit of a proud Hokie, as the sign says. How old were you when you figured out what a Hokie was?
A freshman?
And can you tell the viewers what is a Hokie for those who are uneducated?
Okay, a Hokie, contrary to what a lot of people from Virginia would tell you, a Hokie is simply a nickname that came from a cheer. And the cheer is, and it's very old, Hokie, Hokie, Hokie High, Tech, Tech, VPI, Solar X, Solar Polytech, Virginia, Ray Ra, VPI, Team, Team, Team.
That is fantastic. So it has nothing to do with turkeys.
No.
Someone in my high school insisted that it was a very specific type of turkey.
No, they're all lies. It's just from this cheer that was from like 1890 or something.
So I can't even remember this kid's last name, but Matt, I hope you're watching this and that you've seen the web of lies that you've woven about the Virginia Tech mascot.
That's right.